So this week and next Tuesday, we are bringing forward, turning towards Suzuki Roshi's teachings, which I just want to say I have so many favorite teachings, even if we just stayed to not always so. But then, of course, then I start looking around and finding other things. This is a big discipline to figure out what to say about Suzuki Roshi in just three times. But we've done it before, and we'll come back to it again. And it's a delight. So what we're going to do a little. Uh, Suzuki Roshi speak. Let him speak through Not Always So. But I want to begin with, I don't know if all of you know Crooked Cucumber, David Chadwick. David Chadwick is an early and wonderful and very eccentric Zen teacher. It's the life and Zen teachings of Suzuki Roshi. If you don't know it and if you hadn't read it, and you want something nice to read over the holidays, it's thick, but it's quite readable and informative to understand his life and practice as it was passed to us, because he came and our lineage, San Francisco Zen Center, is Suzuki Roshi lineage. San Francisco Zen Center, Mel Weissman, Norman Fisher, me, and then each one of you. And if you do formal Jukai, your name is put in the lineage. So, but if you trace Suzuki Roshi back, it goes through Dogen, and then it goes through all the ancestors and to Buddha and around and around and around. So Suzuki Roshi is us, and we are Suzuki Roshi. And we're completely different and the same. So I wanted to read from the introduction, just so we have a taste and a flavor of Suzuki Roshi. Begins with little heading. The teaching must not be stock words or stale stories, but must always be kept fresh. That is real teaching. That's what we're doing. Face to face, body to body, in our own lives. Refreshing and being refreshed by the Dharma. One night in February of 1968, I sat among 50 black-robed fellow students, this is David Chadwick, mostly young Americans, at Zen Mountain Center, Tassajara Springs, 10 miles inland from Big Sur, California, deep in the mountain wilderness. The kerosene lamplight illuminated our breath in the winter air of the heated room. Before us, the founder of the first Zen Buddhist monastery in the Western Hemisphere. Now there's so many. When I first started practicing, there were hardly any books on Buddhism and very few places to practice. Nobody could have even imagined what's happened. So there was Suzuki Roshi, and he had concluded a lecture from his seat on the altar platform. Thank you very much, he said softly, with a genuine feeling of gratitude. He took a sip of water, cleared his throat, and looked around at his students. Is there some question? He asked, just loud enough to be heard above the sound of the creek gushing by in the darkness outside. I bowed, hands together, and caught his eye. Hi, he said, meaning yes. Suzuki Roshi. Sort of like the Shuso ceremony, huh? Hi, Suzuki Roshi. Except softly. Our hearts were soft in the exchange of the Shuso ceremony. And Erica, I've been listening to your lectures for years. I said, and I really love them. And they're very inspiring. And I know that what you've been talking about is actually very clear and simple. But I must admit, I just don't understand. I love it, but I feel like I could listen to you for 1,000 years and still not get it. Could you please, just in a nutshell, Can you reduce Buddhism to one phrase? Everyone laughed. He laughed. What a ludicrous question. This is, if you know David Chadwick at all, David Chadwick is one of the few people in the world that can pull off this kind of thing. I don't think any of us expected him to answer it. He was not a man you could pin down, and he didn't like to give his students something definitive to cling to. He often said not to have some idea of what Buddhism is. But Suzuki Roshi did answer. He looked at me and he said, everything changes. And then he asked for another question. There you go. That's it. You get it? Oh, we kind of get it, but we don't really. I don't like it. And everything changes. That's why it's beautiful and ephemeral and luminous. Why the electricity came back on after it went off last night. And it's happening so fast we can't even begin to track it. How do we live in this everything changes? Suzuki Roshi was a Japanese priest in the Soto school of Zen who came to San Francisco in 1959 to minister to a small Japanese American congregation. He came with no plan. He came with no plan, but with the confidence that some Westerners would embrace the essential practice of Buddhism as he had learned it from his teachers. He had a way with things. I love this sentence. It follows Erica's story about when she met Suzuki Roshi. He had a way with things. Plants, rocks, robes, furniture, walking, sitting. That gave a hint of how to be comfortable in the world. He had a way with people that drew them to him, a way with words that made people listen, a genius that seemed to work especially in America and especially in English. Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, a skillfully edited compilation of his lectures published in 1970, has sold over 1 million copies in a dozen languages. And this book was written, I don't know, maybe even 20 years ago now. It's a reflection of where Suzuki put his passion in the ongoing practice of Zen with others. He did not wish to be remembered or to have anything named after him. He did not wish to be remembered or to have anything named after him. He wanted to pass on what he had learned to others, and he hoped that they, in turn, would help to invigorate Buddhism in America and reinvigorate it in Japan. Buddhist ideas had been infiltrating American thought since the days of transcendentalism of Emerson and Thoreau. Here's a little history. I was going to skip this, but I decided it's good. At the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, Soen Shaku turned heads when he made the first public presentation of Zen to the West. 1893. D.T. Suzuki became a great bridge from the East, teaching at Harvard and Columbia and publishing dozens of widely read books in Buddhism in English. When confused with D.T. Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki would say, "No, he's the big Suzuki. I'm the little Suzuki." You're getting a feeling for Suzuki Roshi and our lineage. This is our lineage. This is a way of being that's been passed to each one of us. The first small groups to study and meditate gathered with Sasaki on the East Coast and Nyogen Senzai on the West. Books informed by Buddhism by Hermann Hesse. In college, I read Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha, over and over. I loved that book. And it also speaks to back then, there wasn't so much to read. By Hermann Hesse, Ezra Pound, and the beat writers were discussed in the coffee houses of New York and San Francisco and by college kids in Ohio and Texas. I was a college kid in Ohio. There you go. Alan Watts, the brilliant communicator, for the enthused, and informed a generation that hungered for new directions. And into this scene walked Suzuki Roshi, who embodied and exemplified what had been for Westerners an almost entirely intellectual interest. Now, this is important. A lot of smart kids and scholars began reading and studying Buddhism, but it was intellectual. There wasn't an embodied practice. That's what Suzuki Roshi brought to us. He brought with him a focus on daily zazen, Zen meditation, and what he called practice. Zazen extending into all of our activities. Living zazen, every day, daily practice, continuous practice. He had a fresh approach to living and talking about life. Enormous energy, formidable presence, an infectious sense of humor, and a dash of mischief. If you read Suzuki Roshi's, I say this a lot, but I love it. I take solace in it. It's because Zen can often, and it sort of became, I think we sometimes lose, well, we all lose our sense of humor, but Zen sometimes can look pretty severe and lose its sense of humor. If you walk into San Francisco Zen Center, it can sometimes look a little severe and not very mischievous. Suzuki Roshi, if you read his lectures, he laughs. If you listen to him, he laughs a lot. I think this is really important. And that he had a dash of mischievousness. Thanks for listening to this with me. I love reading this and remembering who we are. From the time he was a new monk at age 13, Suzuki masters Gyokchen Soen Suzuki called him Crooked Cucumber. Crooked cucumbers are useless. Farmers would compost them. Children would use them for batting practice. Soen told Suzuki he felt sorry for him because he would never have any good disciples. And for a long time, it looked as though Soen was right. His teacher said this to him, but Suzuki Roshi just kept going. Then Crooked Cucumber fulfilled a lifelong dream. He came to America, where he had many students, and he died in the full bloom of what he had come to do. He was only here for 12 and a half years. I was trying to figure that out on Tuesday. 12 and a half years. He was only here for 12 and a half years and profoundly changed his life and the lives of many others. San Francisco Zen Center, none of this was here. We weren't here. Well, we were here. But anyway, we are the seeds and the fruit of his 12 and a half year journey to the West. Okay, I love this story. On a mild Tuesday afternoon in August of 1993, I, David Chadwick, had an appointment with Shunryu Suzuki's widow of almost 22 years, Mitsu Suzuki. She was always part of Zen Center. She was always around. She was there with him. Walking up the central steps to the second floor of the San Francisco Zen Center's 3-story red brick building, I passed the founder's alcove dedicated to Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, and then went on to find her, and she said, oh, she was a little Japanese woman. She always wore Japanese dress. She was impeccable, but she'd also been a kindergarten teacher. She was very, very, very sweet person. Oh, thank you for writing about Hojo-san, she said. Hojo-san is what she always called her husband. Hojo is the abbot of a temple. San is the polite form of address. So David says, so you think it's really okay for me to write on Suzuki Roshi? I mean, this is like a big thing. Suzuki Roshi by then had become Suzuki Roshi, who was David Chadwick, who was kind of a messy guy. What wasn't... trying to remember another book he wrote where he really confessed what a bad Zen student he was. That was David's way. So is it okay to write a book about Suzuki Roshi? Oh, yes, yes, she said emphatically. And then she said, tell many funny stories. Funny stories, yes. But not just funny, serious and sad ones too. Everything, right? Yes, but people like funny stories. Mainly, you should tell funny stories. That will be good. Hojo-san liked funny stories. Everyone will be very happy to read them. Doesn't this make you happy? It makes me really happy. There may be some people who don't think I should do the book. She sat down across the table from me and looked directly at me. When I speak now, it is Suzuki Roshi's voice coming through my mouth, and he says, please write a book about me. And thank you very much for writing a book about me. Those are his words. I speak for him. It was time to go. She offered me a green metallic frog that sat in the palm of my hand. Here, take this, she said. It belonged to Hojo-san. He would be happy for you to have it. He loved frogs very much. Remember, she said, tell many funny stories. And then she asked, why would anyone not want you to do a book on Hojo-san? Various reasons. You know, he didn't want anything like that. It would be impossible not to represent him. And you know what Nora Roshi said over 20 years ago, who was a colleague of Suzuki. No, what did Nora say? That Suzuki Roshi was one of the greatest Japanese of his generation, and that no one should write about him who doesn't know all of his samadhis, deep meditation states. And she said, clapping with delight in her voice, good, that's your first funny story. When I get nervous about Zen and being too serious and not knowing anything, and these stories give me great good heart, we'll just keep going on together and loving frogs and laughing and telling funny stories and being grateful, deeply grateful that Suzuki Roshi came here to share his heart with all of us. So now I'm going to share from Not Always So. This is one of my many favorite ones. I kind of promised it on Tuesday and then I got sidetracked a little bit, so I figured I'd come back to it. I'm a gardener. Some of you are gardeners. We're all gardeners, whether you know it or not. It's called Caring for the Soil. Most of us study Buddhism as though it were something that was already given to us. We think we should do it to preserve Buddha's teachings, like putting food in the refrigerator. And then to study Buddhism, we can take the food out of the refrigerator. Oh, I think I'll just take out this Dharma teaching today and take the lid off, and then I'll put it back in again. Whenever you want it, it's already there. Instead, Zen students should be interested in how to produce food from the field and from the garden. We put the emphasis on the ground. There's nothing already here that you can grab hold of. It's the living of it. It's the cultivating of it. It's the laughing of it, the crying of it, the don't knowing of it. All of us have Buddha nature, and the teachings that grow from Buddha nature are similar to one another. The teachings of different schools of Buddhism do not differ so much, but the attitude toward the teaching is different. Mahayana Buddhism, our tradition, explains the interdependency of different beings. the interdependency of different beings. Buddha tried to save us by destroying our common sense. Buddha tried to save us by destroying our common sense. Usually we are not interested in the nothingness of the ground. Our tendency is to be interested in something that is growing in the garden, not the bare soil itself. I used to notice that all the time. I'm not as active a gardener as I used to be. Is when you go into a garden that is well cultivated and cared for over time, it's the soil. You can't believe how beautiful the soil is because the care has been turned and composted and everything's been composted into it. And it's so, I always had the feeling I wanted to eat and roll in the soil. And then, but usually we just go in and we just see the plants or the sunflowers or the what's tended or the weeds, or pay attention to the soil. If you want to have a good harvest, the most important thing is to make the soil rich and to cultivate it well. The Buddha's teaching is not about the food itself, but about how it is grown and how you take care of it. Let go of what you think it should look like, of what you think you should look like, of trying to spiff yourself up to look this or that. I read something on Tuesday about seeds. Plant the seeds, take care of the seeds. Just take care of things each step of the way. Buddha was not interested in a special deity or in something that was already there. He was interested in the ground from which the various gardens will appear. For him, everything is holy. Everything is holy. I used to love, when I lived at Green Gulch Farm, we would go down in the mornings. I think they probably do it a little bit differently now, but there was always a work practice in the mornings, and you'd sit a period or two, get up really, really early. And then everybody who was in the monastery went down to help take care of the garden. And we'd harvest, and we'd get to dump all the compost, all the yucky vegetables and everything from the garden into the compost and turn it. And for me, I loved harvesting, but it was cold. It was so cold when you harvested the chard or the parsley, and the water got on your hands, and your hands were it was very, very cold in the early morning down in Green Gulch Farm Valley. So the best job was the compost, because you got to get up in these long compost bins and turn it, and there was heat. You'd turn it and the heat, it was just such gratitude. The heat of decomposition and of renewal and of everything changing and of preparation for the ground. Just keep composting everything into your life. Buddha did not think of himself as a special person. He tried to be like the most common person, wearing a robe, begging with a bowl. He thought, I have many students because the students are very good, not because of me. I have many students because the students are very good, not because of me. Buddha was great because his understanding of people was good. Because he understood people, he loved them, and he enjoyed helping them. Because he had that kind of spirit, he could be a Buddha. Thank you very much. Buddha was great because his understanding of people was good. Because he understood people, he loved them, and he enjoyed helping them. Because he had that kind of spirit, he could be a Buddha. So I wonder, what is it that Buddha understood about people? What is it that Buddha understood about life that enabled him to help people? What does the Buddha in you understand about life, about yourself, about people, about everything changes, not always so? And how does that help you be of help to yourself and those around you and the world? Nothing special, but what do you and the Buddha in you understand? And how does it inform your life? So I'm going to put us in